Like, I don't know where they come from and every now.
Hi everyone, welcome back to She Birds podcast. Today's guest is HM Gooding. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to our podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So can you tell our listeners when you first realized you wanted to be an author?
Well, I mean, I've loved reading and writing ever since I was a little kid, and I think I was about 6 when I decided that was what I was going to do for a living, and then it took me 30 some years to get back to that because you have to pay your bills and like do things that adults do, and then once I had sort of figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, I kind of veered back into it and actually started writing again to, I guess, mostly cope with all of the emotions and just, things that I've seen in my life and experienced working and having kids and just living. So it really got me through a rough time. I think, it's 3 in the morning with a 10-month-old, my third of like 3 and 3 years, 3.5 years. And I was just like, I'm gonna die. And all I'll ever have done is looked after babies and gone to work. And I will never have written that book that I've always wanted to write. So I just decided to write that book. And actually, I had been kind of blogging a little bit before then, but that was NaNoWriMo 2015.
Wow, nice.
So
So
six
what does
years.
your family think about your writing?
My husband says it's the best stuff he's ever read, except for all of the other stuff he's read. So he's quite proud of me. And my two older are in grade 4 and 5, and they love it. They they actually love reading my books, and they're not just saying that. Because they refuse to read the ones that aren't like the stuff they want to read. The one won't read the zombie book, even though it's not at all scary, because he's not into zombies. And then the other one won't read like the mermaid stuff because that's too girly. I'm like, all right. So
I bet you they go to school and be like, my mom is an author.
less now than when it first happened. They've sort of gotten kind of blasé about the whole thing. They're like, yeah, whatever. That's just that thing she does. But they do write their own books now, which are incredibly graphic. The older one is really into like manga and like all of those like the YouTube and the Netflix cartoon type stuff, and spends hours drawing those with their friends and stuff. So yeah, they think they might do that too one day.
Nice. So, what inspired you to write passages, death, dementia, and everything in between?
So that is actually probably the earliest thing that I've written. So everything else that I've released has been mostly paranormal. I tried to write when I was in my early 20s, but everybody kept ending up with magic powers. And that was kind of before anybody was able to do that. That was long before anything other than like the hardcore science fiction and fantasy stuff. So this normal people with like, oh, here's a random magic power was not a thing. So I just kept throwing those in a closet. Um, so this was the first stuff that I'd written when I kind of started to get back into writing. And a lot of it is just daily reflections about working with people with dementia and just kind of walking with people through their lives, and also, of course, trying to tie that back together with the feelings I was having. Again, working full time, having 3 kids under 5, just being exhausted and just kind of in that stage of life where you're like, okay, well, I've done all of the things they say you're supposed to do, but I really haven't put myself first. And then, you know, while you're kind of dealing with that, you're also seeing people that are at the end of their life and just kind of putting yourself in their shoes a little. So it's just a collection of all of those feelings and moments. I mean, there's pieces of my childhood in there. There's memories of my grandparents, and yeah, just a little bit of everything, and just kind of exploring that death is part of life. This is all part of life, but we really don't it's almost like it's this deep secret that we all keep tucked away and we don't wanna deal with, but we all have to deal with it. And I think
Mhm.
it's this year particularly has really brought home to so many people that we will all die someday, and we don't know when that is, and we hope it isn't now, and we hope nobody that we love will pass away anytime soon, but we're talking about these things now, and I think for many people, this is the first time in their life they've really ever confronted it as anything other than this sort of vague, someday down the road kind of idea.
Right, right. Wow. Wow. So can you give our listeners like a brief summary of the book? Like,
Um, so I've sort of separated I think there's like 10 chapters, but it's sort of separated into memories of childhood, um, you know, thresholds, kind of um, motherhood. There's
mhm,
there's intermix of poetry and prose and just some sort of short story kind of couple page long tales, of course, not with direct patient names or anything like that in there, but just mixtures of situations that, have been really touching for me. And
mhm.
it's almost like random musings, just sort of semi-organized. So, for a lack of a better way of saying it.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to check that book out. So, who are a few of your favorite authors, and have any of them inspired any of your novels?
Well, I mean, when we talk about magic, I grew up,
Mhm.
reading things like Andre Norton, Mercedes Lackey, Stephen King, although not all of them because some are too scary for me. Neil Gaiman, and Piers Anthony. I went through a phase, I think around grade 6, where he has like a gajillion books out, and I think I read all of them in a year, like 50 in a year or something. And I think I have a book out. It's I was a teenage vegetarian zombie detective, and I think that book was very inspired by him because he was the king of puns. Everything was a pun. Like, instead of like Okeechobee, it's like Ogerchobi. And
So, was it a children's book or like a teen
I mean,
book, or was
I
it?
think it's fantasy, and I think it can be read by adults. Like, he's got a whole bunch out there. But that was the Xanth series,
Mhm,
and it was just like, if you could think of a pun, I think it's in that book. And it was
mhm.
this mythical land that's like somewhere again around Lake Okeechobee, I guess. And I'm in Canada, so I was like, "Where exactly is that?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a pun. There is no ogre. Okay, okay." But, yeah, I've always really enjoyed magic and just kind of this idea that there's so much more than we can see. So anybody that wrote things like that, I was totally into. And yeah, and then in terms of, like, poetry, I think probably I was very inspired by my first year university, teacher, Dr. Zhu, who made us read all of these, like, Tennyson and then W.C. Williams and E. Cummings and Ezra Pound and just, like, all of these people that all, I think, mostly died horrible deaths, except for W.C. Carlos, or yeah, W.C. Williams, because he was actually a family doctor, and I think I was inspired by him because he would just write on anything. Like, he had napkins, and I think they said when he died, there was, like, pieces of paper all over the place with, like, little scraps of verse on everything. And I was like, "I
Wow.
could do that. Like, that doesn't take much time. If he could do that, I could do that." So,
That's awesome.
yeah, I
So
basically read everything.
that's I agree with you about Stephen King. Like some of his books, like people think his movies aren't that scary, but if you read his books, you'll be like, oh my.
Yeah, I tried to read Salem's Lot when I think I was even, like, possibly, like, in my late 20s, and
Mhm.
I felt like Joey from Friends. He was reading, I don't remember which book it was, and he put it in the freezer. So I get halfway through Salem's Lot, and I was like, "Oh, no, there's kid vampires, I can't handle this." And I just put it away. I was like, "I'm not finishing it." And then I had, like, a dream every single night, and I was, like, finishing the story, and all of the endings were just horrible. And so finally I finished it. I'm like, "Well, that's not nearly as scary as my head was making." So, yeah.
Man, Salem's Lot is my favorite.
Oh.
I love Salem's
But
Lot.
those kid vampires, like, they're I mean, I also can't handle zombies. I think there's, like, this moral, ethical wrongness, and I'm just like, "No, no." It just
Mine is like real life people, like, Misery, her. Oh my goodness, she was
yeah,
insane.
she
Like
was, and I try not to read things that like that because, I mean, I think I know some people like that, and I'm like, "I don't wanna read about this." Because I'd rather just think everybody is wonderful, and social media shows me enough that they are not all wonderful. That's why I
So,
like magic.
so what was your hardest scene to write and why?
Oh gosh. I mean, I cried my way through that book for sure. Um, and editing it was fun because I mean, I wrote the stuff. I've revised it a million times, and I've had 6 years to kinda, like, you know nope, still cried. And
Still
some of it's
crying.
happy tears, some of it's sad tears. I often get teary just kinda thinking about my grandparents because I miss them, and it's just I think that old saying that you only are sad about things that mattered
Mhm.
is kinda nice because it would be worse not to miss them,
Right, right,
right?
right.
So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree. That's
So
why I try to take time to, like, speak to older people. They have really,
mhm.
really wonderful stories to tell. So,
Oh, they
like,
do.
they
Yes.
talk a lot though. They talk a whole lot, but it's because they don't have anybody. Like, so
Often. Yeah.
I'm a good listener. So I'll be like, "Oh, okay."
Good. I mean, that's what we need more of. Like, I think in some ways it's fantastic that we have a system where people can go to get care, but
Mhm.
I don't like the way it's separated because
Yeah.
I've seen some of the long-term care facilities that they have in other countries, like, I don't know if it's one of the Scandinavian countries. They always seem to have the coolest things when it comes to healthcare. And it's like they have these little villages and they're just set up like, you got your shop down the street and like there's like a daycare and they got a library, but it's like a dementia ward, but it's a village. And I just think that's a fantastic idea. Like, yeah, these things would take a little bit more planning, but what an amazing quality of life.
Mhm.
And instead of feeling like they're locked away, they are part of the community. And
Right.
I think those are the kind of things that we need more of.
Mhm.
We
I
need
agree.
to hear these stories from people from all age groups. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so much value in what the elderly can tell us, and, I mean, maybe if we listened a bit more, we wouldn't keep repeating the same dumb stuff over and over again. But
Exactly.
I'm like, "We
Exactly.
did this pandemic thing 100 years ago, and, um, they did a better
Yeah.
job."
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
it's like,
I did learn something interesting because my mom, she's about to be, I think she's about to be 51. And I was looking at segregation and I was like, wait, my mom lived through segregation?
yeah,
Like,
it's not
I'm
very
like,
long ago.
yeah, I was
No.
like, that's not a long time. And even my grandmother, I'm like, wait a minute, y'all lived through this? Like, I thought the
Mhm,
way they taught us in school was that it was like a long, long time ago and all those people are dead now.
mhm.
No, they're not.
They're not, and I mean, I also like, I love history, and I have taken a lot of history classes over the years, and it irks me the way they always make this history, like, look so pretty for the little kids, and I'm like, "That's not appropriate." I mean, talk about whitewashing things, like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
it's like, talk about history being the story written by the winners, like,
Mhm.
you're totally negating all of these experiences of everybody that came before us,
Mhm.
and, I mean, we just had our first Truth and Reconciliation Day on the 30th of September, in Canada. It's a new federal holiday because I don't know if you've heard, but there was a bunch of mass graves that have been found, and I don't even know if found is the right word because people knew they were there, right? I mean, these children were taken away, often by force, from their
Mhm.
families, from their culture, and thrown in schools to basically make them speak English and take their culture away. And I mean, if you look at what the definition of genocide is, like that's
Mhm.
right up there as one of the ways to kill a culture is take the children.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, even if everything was beautiful and those kids hadn't died and been horribly mistreated, which they were,
Mhm.
that's still genocide because you've removed the culture.
Exactly.
And a person adrift from their culture
Mhm.
has so many problems. Like there's so much pain with that.
Mhm.
So, horrible things happened.
Mhm.
So many children died, but the children that lived, like they lost so many valuable pieces of themselves.
Mhm. Right.
And so
Mhm.
it's something that we're just often people are just learning about because again, if it didn't affect you, you're like, "What? That happened? That's horrible."
Mhm. Exactly.
And it
Exactly.
wasn't long ago. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1995.
What?
I was in grade 11.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's
Wow.
not something that most people know here,
Mhm.
right? Because
That's true.
if you didn't go, you don't know.
Exactly.
You don't learn
Exactly.
about that, right? Nobody wants to
Mhm.
talk about the horrible parts of history,
Mhm. Just want
especially
to
when
sugarcoat
you know, especially when you're kinda responsible for the horrible parts of history, right?
it. Right?
So, I think, you know, this year has been a very valuable one
Mhm.
and a very painful one, and writing has definitely helped me kind of work through some of that, but I've also been spending a lot of it just reading and learning and again seeing things that I didn't know. I mean, I'm very sheltered, I'm very lucky,
Mhm. Yeah.
but even though I've seen this much of it, I
Mhm.
had no idea what so many people were living through. And I
Mhm.
think this year has really opened a lot of people's eyes. I hope, and I hope that the world will become better once we get through this. But I mean, I also write magic, so I'll keep working on my little corner of the world. I just really hope other people also take what they've learned and try to make the world better.
I agree. I agree. I want to thank you so much, Heather, for coming on my podcast today.
Thank you. We got the book's a little deep, so the conversation gets a little deep, but I,
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, if I can make the world better and
Mhm.
touch somebody's heart, whether it's through my writing or hopefully by raising kids that don't kill each other, and just make the world a better place. I think that that really is what I'm hoping to do, and I'm always really touched if people do want to read anything I've written, and I much appreciate having the chance to come on here and chat today.
You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, I want to thank you all so much for listening to my interview with Heather. If you want to know more about Heather or to purchase any of her books, I have linked a website below which takes you to her website and takes you to her book. But within this website, it gives a bio of her, and the podcast can be found on different platforms, on all platforms. So I want to thank you all so much for supporting my podcast, and thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all have a great day and make great choices. Bye.